one.
And that giant cacophony tells you that yet again you're listening to the Power of Three podcast, the Scottish Doctor Who podcast, going through time and space and books, because books are quite a good time capsule in their own right to capture those little moments in time. And today we're talking about one from the space year 2004. I'm Kenny Smith. I'm not alone.
I'm David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And in the early tradition of the podcast, we have a third voice with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself, third voice?
Hello, I'm Simon Messingham.
Yay! Simon is this, listeners, because we're going to be talking about his 2004 epic, The Indestructible Man.
Indeed, because Dave, when we decided we'd have a look at some more books and do a run on them, this was your nomination for the second Doctor book, and it was a clear favourite with both of us.
Absolutely. Shall I read the back cover?
No, I think we should make the author do it.
Oh, that would be fun.
I'll have to go and get it then. Can you spare me 5 minutes?
Shall I just do it?
We'll let Dave do it. Let Dave do it.
I would do it. I should have brought it on. Obvious that I should have had it on me.
Okay. So I'm while you're here, Simon, how do we pronounce it? Is it the Myloki?
Yeah. That's good.
That's one question answered after 20 years. The Myloki, mysterious aliens from beyond space and time. Their target, Earth. Had to attempt Ed Bishop there. Humans of Prism are enmeshed in a doomed interstellar war against an unknowable invader armed with the power to possess, duplicate, and destroy from within. Only one man stands in their way, a man destiny has made indestructible. Against all odds, the legendary Indestructible Man saves the Earth, but victory comes at the highest price. The world economy collapses, governments crumble, and Prism itself is torn apart by a best-selling expose. AD 2096. Prism has gone underground, becoming the clandestine Silhouette, headed by new commander Hal Bishop. Bishop receives an urgent summons to his headquarters. An infiltrator has been unmasked and captured in the heart of Silhouette itself. Fatally wounded, the infiltrator makes a miraculous recovery. It appears he is indestructible. The implications are terrifying. The Myloki may just have returned, and who is left to stop them? This adventure features the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe.
Jolly well read. Well done.
Where were we all 20 years ago when this book was published then? What was on in 2004?
I was engaged and getting ready to get married that October, having just had the 20th wedding anniversary and been to Lanzarote to celebrate it. Working at the Rutherglen Reformer, which was my local newspaper, and still hadn't tracked down Andrew Smith at this point.
I was in the process of shifting from HMV East Kilbride to HMV Clydebank, the new shop that we opened in the run-up to Christmas. And I can date it very specifically because I started reading this book while I was working at each HMV East Kilbride and finished it while I was in the process of setting up HMV Clydebank. So it's a perfect little time, so I can remember it very, very clearly. Simon, what were you up to 20 years ago?
I think I was in my purple phase, actually. I had a TV series out that no one watched. And then I'd got commissioned to write a feature film for British Film Council. So, yeah, I was living in West London, living the dream, I think. And then, 2004, it kind of all ended. And,
what was the TV show, Simon?
I co-wrote, I should say, with Alex Kirk, a show called Tales of Uplift and Moral Improvement with Rick Mail. And it's one of those stories. It was the story it's actually out there, 13 episodes. And Rick Mail played an Edwardian woman who's 101. And basically, it's Jack and Ori, but very, very dark and comic. It was broadcast on... The plan was it would launch BBC Three. That was the thinking at the time. So we wrote it with that in mind. And then the BBC didn't get the licence of the government, BBC Three. temporarily. So they slung it out on BBC Choice. Nobody watched it because nobody had BBC Choice. And what killed us, a couple of things killed us off was, so it was broadcast and it did very well on BBC Choice. I think it got a highest. But when I was writing them, or when we were writing them, I should say, the guy who ran the upcoming BBC Three decided that kids didn't have the attention span to last 25 minutes. So I had to rewrite all of our scripts to 15, which was quite hard in like no time. So when they broadcast it, they came out as 15 minutes and inevitably showed 2 at a time. And then it could never go into another time slot on regular telly. So it just disappeared and has remained disappeared forever. And there were other political things going on. But then BBC Three did launch, and then they decided to... The word when it came down from BBC that it was a youth channel, so anyone over the age of 25 who had a project in no longer had a project. So that we were going to do another series called Bad Sex, which was a similar Jack and Ori with bad sex. And that was... So that, anyway, that's nothing to do with Doctor Who. But so at the time, but I got a commission to write a feature film called Goth Holiday about some goths who go off, who basically... They deliberately fail their A-levels and drive around the country to reenact various goth things, and then with the vow that they'll all kill themselves. But of course they don't. It's comedy. And that, at the time of writing this, that was sitting in development because it was sheer hell. I mean, it was development hell. It was literal. And then about a year later, I just walked away from it and went, I can't do this anymore. So, but at this time, you know, I was doing all right, you know, and I was getting some decent writing gigs for things. Yeah. I was doing shows, and yeah, it was a good period of my life. So then I decided to write a really bleak dystopian Doctor Who novel. But I kind of thought Doctor Who was done with me as ever, and you know, I was busy, and then I can't remember anything about this, but I imagine I got asked to write another one, and then I went. Ooh. But I had quite a lot of, the Gerry Anderson thing. I remember. I had a lot of time thinking, I'm going to redo Gerry Anderson for this bleak, dark. I don't know. I kind of don't really feel that now. And that's the biggest shock I got from rereading it, was I don't feel that needs to be that dark. You know, I don't think I got that out of my system. We'll talk about reaction to the book, but yeah, so that's where I was. Anyway, I was living in West London and actually thinking, here we go, I'm on the way up, you know.
Yeah. Not to make this sound like a bad thing, but it is incredibly bleak. We'll probably talk about this as well. Like, were we all fans of Gerry Anderson stuff when we were...
Oh, 100%, yeah. Loved it. Started the morning repeats on STV. That's where I got into them. Loved it.
Yeah. I remember Thunderbirds on STV, and remember Stingray would be on Sunday mornings, and they showed tons of Captain Scarlet over the school holidays in 1985, so... and as I said, like before we started recording, we still got quite a few of the Channel 5 VHSs. And when I started my first job in 1990, and suddenly had, when I was still at school, and suddenly had all this cash that I never had before. I was buying Gerry Anderson videos by the ton. What about you, Simon? Were you old enough to see them first time round?
How dare you? No, I do remember in the early 70s. I particularly loved Thunderbirds, actually, but for weird reasons when I was a very young kid, partly because they were so long, the episodes, and as a kid. But you kind of lived in that world for a bit, and, you know, as a very small kid, you dip in and out. You're not really, and they were quite easy to get what was happening. Although, in that, you know, as a disaster, they're going to go and figure it out in a very slow, ploddy, methodical way, you know. And when I did actually buy Thunderbirds on the DVD box set. And after the first few, I started to go off it, funnily enough.
Right.
It all got a bit about secret agents and then mysteries. And I actually just simply liked the sort of Towering Inferno bits of it, where something bad would happen. They'd all fly and try and fix it in a sort of slow... And it all, presumably, you know, Thunderbird 1 would normally blow something up in order to solve the problem. So you were kind of waiting there. But I think I liked the ritual of it all, that you always get the same clips and you knew everyone, you know, there's this real clarity in Thunderbirds that I really, really liked as a very small child.
Yeah.
I liked Stingray, but that was obviously older. and that felt a bit more like the embryonic Thunderbirds in a way. And then you had Captain Scarlet, which to me seemed massively adult and quite sophisticated and quite hard to work out. And then, of course, you had UFO, which was really grown up, and that was a Sunday afternoon in Hampshire. UFO, and that was almost too beyond your understanding as a kid, as a 12, 13, I don't know how old I was, 10 or 11. It was, you got the setup, but the mechanics of it were quite difficult to follow. You know, and of course, when you watch it now, you watch it for all the wrong reasons. You know, everyone's smoking and drinking and ogling women, and you know, and they're the bits that you love more. You know, but
no, I think Scarlet's definitely my favourite. It's definitely, I think that's the bleakest of them all, because every story's someone's got to die. So some of them are brutal. Like, I think the best one's like when the car mechanic gets sort of squashed in the elevating platform, and you see all the blood sort of out the car. It's so whose idea then was it? I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's not really a Doctor Who book, The Indestructible Man. It's a sort of Elseworlds, what if everything went wrong in the Gerry Anderson universe type story. Whose idea was it? Was that one that you sort of suggested, or was it suggested to you? Can you remember?
No, I definitely suggested it. I don't think I ever meant anything mad like writing everything down, but I remember always thinking, how could you toughen up Gerry Anderson? How could you make? I suppose I don't know what I must have been influenced by something, but I did definitely. I mean, I know the one big influence that made me do it, absolutely, definitely. But I'll maybe not talk about that yet. But I remember wanting to, I suppose, what do they call it? Retrofit Gerry Anderson, make it work for quite a long time. And I think I just noodled into how would Thunderbirds fit into UFO and how would, but the ultimate thing was Captain Scarlet, who I thought was really cool, and the notion of being indestructible, I was really, really attracted to that, what the implications of that are. And but the fact that you say it's not a Doctor Who, but as soon as I thought Patrick Troughton, I thought he is part of that world. You know, they sort of run parallel, don't they? That's kind of feel, and I thought he could fit into that. And when I got Zoe, I thought, well, she would inevitably work on Moonbase. I thought, I won't lie, when I started writing it, I pitched it as a lot funnier than it ended up being. But I knew that I didn't want it to be an exercise in nostalgia. I really didn't want it to be that. I wanted to add something, not just sort of celebrate. So I remember, I think it probably went dark because I thought, I don't just want to get, do you remember mobiles? Do you remember this? You know, because a lot of Doctor Who books had seemed to do that. Yeah. And I thought, no, you've got to try and go beyond just an exercise in nostalgia.
Yeah, I think it works very well for that. I mean, I devoured this the first time I read it. I couldn't put it down, and it was, as such a big Gerry Anderson fan, it made perfect sense to sort of, it's a very adult, imaginative, logical sort of extrapolation of everything that's involved and what would go on and what would actually happen. And as you say, all the stuff, the stuff that I really liked this time was the way that the general public didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah.
An installation would get blown up, or a high-ranking politician would disappear or be killed, and they kept that quiet because it was, prison were dealing with it and all that sort of stuff. And you sort of thought, what would it be like to live in a Gerry Anderson universe when all this sort of stuff was going on? I think that was captured really, really well. I mean, all the stuff about all the people in the little sort of city zone sort of struggling to survive, because it felt like a real sort of logical extrapolation of what would happen in the real world if this sort of stuff went on.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I tried to do. I went, no false modesty. Yeah, I did think, and also how much it would bankrupt the planet to pay for all the stuff that they use, and how did they power the Thunderbirds without wrecking the ozone layer, imagine how much fuel does Thunderbird 2 burn when it just flies anyway, and those sorts of things that I was thinking. So I sort of had to invent how do they power everything, And yeah, so I guess it was a labour of love, I thought, well, how would this happen? You'd have to have, because the key to Thunderbirds is actually how they work out how to power everything for no money, don't it? I mean, because you couldn't use fuel. Empty all the oil wells in the world in about half an hour, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Can I hop on a bit about the plot here? But the scene when the Doctor visits the John Tracy equivalent, and that's the thing to talk about actually. Before we get into that, the character names, the
Sharon and Tracy,
Sharon, instead of Tracy's. Bishop is obviously named after Ed Bishop. Matthews is obviously named after Francis Matthews. All that sort of stuff was a lot of fun. I mean, that helps keep it light, I think. From getting too bleak. Was that something you had fun with, naming all the characters?
Oh yeah, definitely. And my favourite was Seward, actually, the space early warning system, which I thought, because obviously you look at the acronym and go, oh, brilliant, that all fits, And, yeah, I mean, it was weird. I think Justin edited this one, and I thought he might pull me up on how dark it was. And I don't remember much about writing it, but I think I remember the bit where Jamie is sort of lost in the city and thinking, I don't know how to get him out of this without going really dark. I mean, when I reread it, I mean, I thought, bloody hell, this is like a real proper, well-structured book, whoever wrote this. This is really, really well done, But I did find it a bit relentless. And it could have, certainly those bits when Jamie's lost going, might have thought of something, a different way to do this might have been better. But, when he gets into the underwater base with Captain Black, then it pays off, I think.
Jamie really goes through the ringer in this, and I mean, they all do, because obviously the Doctor kind of attempts to regenerate at the start. That's what the back cover's alluding to, and obviously the chemicals that they're pumping him full sort of stop that. And poor Zoe, who, ends up sort of, in the slave class and almost about, she meets possibly the love of her life, and then he gets shot by George Sewell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's dark.
I don't know. I think it might have just been, I need to get them to the next place.
Sure.
I can't remember really, but yeah. It's difficult now to think back to the kind of person I was then, and I think maybe it was quite a bright and optimistic time, and I thought, let's pull the rug out from under that a little bit,
I mean, I think that works really well because all of the Gerry Anderson series are. I mean, UFO is obviously the most adult, but they especially the 60s puppet shows, they have that optimistic vision of the future. And I think it's, we're kind of growing up in the real world now, and I'm not as optimistic as about the future as these series, people making these programs obviously were in the 60s, and it's interesting to counter that and be maybe a little bit more realistic about it. So I think it all works really.
And yeah, Captain Scarlet for me was always horror. I mean,
yeah.
And as he was the kind of the key to this book, it had to be horror. But again, I alluded to when I reread this, I thought this is basically me wanting to do my favourite bit of telly ever that seared itself into my brain as a kid, which was Quatermass 4.
Oh, of course.
And I can tell that this is me doing that, and that is the bleakest thing ever. But I remember as a child, because I saw it when it was on, and going, oh my God, and, you're too young, but, in the late 70s at my school was a pretty grim place. It was black and white, everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
And then I remember I went on a school trip to the Isle of Wight, and there was an ITV strike, and you came back, and I was like, oh man, I've been camping in the tent in November, oh my God, oh, we'll watch some telly. ITV's back on, boom, and there's Quatermass, episode 1. I've never seen such a brutal, brilliant sort of metaphor for where I was living, you know what I mean? And it was a nightmare that of course it looks incredibly dated now, but at the time you felt, well, we're not far off this, you know what I mean? And I've never lost that it completely stayed with me. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. And that runs all the way through Indestructible Man. And Paul Ebbs agrees with me. He says, he's the same age as me, and he was like, yeah, that you're never going to beat that Quatermass. But I don't think it was a positive thing in some ways because it was so bleak. It was so kind of, but
I remember Talking Pictures showed it during lockdown, and I've had the DVDs for years, but I watched it when Talking Pictures showed it again, and it's, even the dog dies in a horrible way.
Yeah.
It is very grim.
I mean, I can't really overstate how the end of that first episode, spoiler, so you've kind of sat through sort of an hour of grim dystopian 2000 AD punk thing. Suddenly, cosmic horror. You're like, I remember being I was not expecting this. You've got this horrible, scary kind of James Herbert-y scene around a Stonehenge place, and then suddenly, what the hell? You know what I mean? And
yeah.
I don't think I've ever recovered. But I remember thinking Simon McCorkadale was like maybe the coolest man on the.
I still maintain it. He is manimal.
Yeah, he shouts a lot in other things, but in this he's reasonably restrained, isn't he?
Yeah.
But he was so handsome and so sort of virile. I remember going, blimey, and episode 4 when he is so tossed away.
It's so casual. Yeah. It's like
it's such a brilliant piece of work, and it gets horribly sort of maligned for being not set in the 60s or whatever.
That's the whole point. They have anybody who says that misses the whole point.
Yeah, it was so strong, and it was out of any single thing I've ever seen. I think that's probably the one that's most affected me, and it runs through Indestructible. The villains are the same. The alien menace. The same, and I absolutely bloody love the whole idea of an alien that is so unknowable that there's no possible way of communicating with it. That is a straight nick from Quatermass.
Right.
And Planet of Evil was the same, so there's no surprise that I kind of loved Planet of Evil because it has that same unknowable thing. They're not just people with funny heads or Daleks. Who are essentially Nazis. This is like something you'll never comprehend.
Yeah.
Something that I thought sort of on the lighter side of things, which I thought was fantastic. It was just like the plays, and you obviously mentioned the likes of some of the names you came up with, like for obviously the likes of Bishop and Matthews. But I thought coming up with names like Silhouette and Shadow, and the lightnings instead of the thunderbirds, that sort of thing, and the manta instead of stingray and stuff. I think these are really good high-level Anderson level jokes for the fans there. And you must have enjoyed that. That given you a bit of joy doing those.
I loved it. That's why I did it, really. The darkness came with it, but essentially I kind of wanted to be in that world, and how does it make sense? And I wanted to be a man that explained how it worked, and I never really got, and I was always fascinated about what does being indestructible mean for Captain Scarlet, and I didn't really realise for a while that he's not really Captain Scarlet, he's a construct.
Yeah.
So is he the same or isn't he? And then and then also I think it's a cheat because in the first episode of Captain Scarlet he is indestructible, and in episode 2 someone says he's virtually indestructible. You go, oh right, so he can die then. So he's not going to live till he's outlived time itself. He's not. And if you dissolved him in acid to a molecular level, he wouldn't come back. I guess, but
because that's one thing I liked about the book. I'd forgotten about, is how they do think they have got a way of killing him, but then he reassembles.
That's like Captain Jack.
Yeah.
We're now going to pause briefly, and we're going to have our first excerpt from The Indestructible Man. And this is going to be read for us by the author, Simon Messingham.
The replica thought and felt and remembered like Matthews. He possessed the personality, the emotions and memories of the original. He believed he was the original in every way, except he wasn't. He isn't. Matthews was our first breakthrough. Up until then, we'd been facing two types of clandestine attack. Firstly, there were the shiners. These were the possessed, ordinary men and women who were somehow enslaved by the Mylokai. Their wills wiped out, so they became nothing but puppets, acting under orders from their new masters. They seemed tougher and more resilient than humans, but in reality, this was more to do with their inability to care about self-damage and their masters' willingness to drive them beyond all normal human tolerances. Some instances of original personalities remained, enough to get past guards in bases and so on, but after a while we learnt to spot them. The second type was the replica, all two of them. The first, Captain Taylor, the officer in charge of the attack on the Molokai base up on the moon, returned to us to wreak havoc. No one had ever got close enough to him and lived to make any kind of accurate report on what made him tick. However, the Molokai clearly had insufficient knowledge of human physiology at that time to create an effective replica. Taylor had the same lack of initiative as the more common Shiners. They had sent him back as a slack, emotionless zombie. Matthews was different. This one was identical in every way, down to the DNA. Furthermore, he believed himself to be Matthews. This was revealed once Colonel LeBlanc had ordered the xenopsychologist to unblock the Molokai conditioning, a fantastic reconstruction. But what was really amazing and frightening about the new Captain Matthews was not the breathtaking accuracy of his duplication, but his imperviousness to damage. It seemed that he could be hurt and wounded. He felt pain and privation like any human. He wasn't especially strong or resilient. It was just that he couldn't be killed. Not by anything.
It's quite a metaphysical thing when you watch the TV series, the original TV series, is that he dies in the opening minutes of the first episode. The car goes off the road. You see the body getting dragged away. He's gone, and it's for the rest of the run of the 30 episodes. It's this Mystron reconstruction, and I always sort of wondered if they'd ever do a story where he would maybe go bad, or the Mystrons would reassert control over him or something, and or have him in the same way that they had control over Captain Black. The version of Captain Black in this is amazing. I mean, I remember reading it recently and just being like, there's one line where it talks about him reappearing in a French graveyard, and I was because that's a reference to the title sequence, obviously, but it's just the idea that he is this walking corpse.
Yeah,
won't really dwell on in the TV series, obviously. But it's that's what he is. He's just an animated dead man, a puppet for the Mysterons. And I loved how you brought all that stuff together and really took the core concepts. If you think about them for a minute or two longer, this is what's actually going on.
Yeah, it was great. And I remember reading it. They're going, Captain Black, blimey, how's anyone going to stop this guy? Yeah, and I liked those bits and.
Especially his escape from when he's been imprisoned, and it's just that he's absolutely. This is like the Terminator.
Yeah,
exactly.
Amazing. You feel so sorry for the sort of prison governor guy who I sort of imagined as a sort of squat little stingray puppet sort of man.
Yeah.
There's obviously a couple of other Anderson series which you didn't really reference so strongly. Did you ever have a plan for Joe 90?
I think at some point I couldn't. It would have over. I think one review already said. It's just so full of references that the book doesn't work, and I think Craig Hinton said that. But I would disagree with him. But I did think I can't go back to Fireball XL5 or I think I might have tried to put a Joe 90 in it, but it would have just sort of I think I started with Thunderbirds, and I'm quite Stingray really, I suppose. But Thunderbirds is the starting point where I figured that once brains had figured out how to power their machine, that started the Gerry Anderson world. Mm-hmm. And everything follows from that. So, and I'd forgotten quite a lot of it, how Captain Scarlet's outfit had sort of nationalised Thunderbirds and taken all of the stuff, and then that's how Captain Scarlet came to be. I mean, there is a Space 1999 reference in there.
Yes, with the moon.
Yeah, they blast a bit of that off, don't they? Which, of course, even at the time in Space 1999, but apart from the theme tune, I never liked. I thought, because I just didn't believe the concept of it. I mean, there were so many easier ways to make that believable than pretend that the moon has flown off.
Yeah.
How fast is it going? You know what I mean? Or does it... You know, I mean, I'm sure someone has sorted that out. But
I used to be quite scared of space. 1999, because they show it in our region on Sunday afternoons after Glenn Michael's cartoon cavalcade. So you'd go from the very wholesome, very Glaswegian family program to, you know, just sheer terror. I mean, it was just like, I used to hate it. You know, it was so unpleasant. I've made a couple of attempts to try and watch it all the way through Space 1999, but I stall after 2 or 3 episodes because it's very one note. I mean, the thing about UFO is that mixture of the Gerry, what everyone thinks of as Gerry Anderson style, you know, model work with live action, and there's much more model work in it. It's much more interesting, but the stories I think is a lot richer, a lot deeper in UFO. Can you remember when you wrote this book? Did you watch any of the old series back again for reference, or did you just go from your memories? Because the UFO stuff in particular is very sharp. That's very well observed.
I didn't really know. I mean, I didn't think I had access to it at the time, but I suppose I was more interested in my memory of Gerry Anderson than I think I might have watched a bit more Captain Scarlet, because I wasn't that familiar with Captain Scarlet. You know, I knew the setup and I'd read the annuals, but actually seeing the programmes, I couldn't quite remember. I mean, you kind of like, Gerry Anderson, you remember the titles and you remember the end titles and you remember the bits that they always do, but you couldn't pick apart, actually. I remember thinking Captain Scarlet was very cool, and I liked the sort of the manly men in their sort of doing stuff, and the dolly birds in their planes. You know, I liked, because I don't know, I'm not, you know, from the 60s and the 70s, things seemed properly done then. Yeah, and now I kind of like that sort of comfort and certainty of as a young boy. You know.
One thing I thought was funny this time was that you, with the cherubs, you got the old angel pilots left, and they were all a bit older, and you know, like
that's like ropey Patsy Stone types, is how I pictured them.
That was quite.
I wanted to just like smoking in the come on in, right, take off. And,
the characterization also, I think the lead character really is Hal Bishop. You know, named after the guy who played Strake and played Captain Blue. It's very much his story. And one thing actually, the ending of it all landed. I seem to remember when I first read it, not really getting what was happening at the end. But this time, it sat with me a lot better. You know, the sort of bridging area between, and how what's the word, subjective, I suppose, for one of better way putting it, was all going. And I remember sort of thinking Bishop kind of, it was a really good ending for Bishop, because it just kind of took him out, and it didn't, you know, in some ways it didn't resolve stuff for him, but it was his own fault he ended up there in a lot of ways. And the idea that Captain Scarlet was reclaimed, I thought was brilliant, because the idea that he would just, I used to always sort of wonder, like, you know, would he get older? Would he live on forever? Would he be like the Phantom Stranger in comics or whatever? He would just sort of be in this permanent state, and everything else would sort of float past him. So I loved how the ending just sort of like really addressed the part that he was part Mysteron, part human, and the Mysterons wanted that back. I think that's a good, really satisfying conclusion to the whole idea.
I think that I do remember that one sort of ever disagreement that I'd had with Justin was about Bishop's death, and I had to say, I'm doing a Simon McCorkin now. I'm just you've set him up, and I'm just going to sort of snuff him out.
Yeah.
And he didn't like that. He said that in Quatermass, Simon McCorkin earns that death, but he didn't feel that Bishop had. But I couldn't. I said, well, what do you want me to do now? I don't really know what to do here, you know, because I've set this up that's what would happen to him.
I think
we agreed to this. I mean, he was very nice. He just went, we'll do it.
I think it worked very well, because Bishop's a bastard, and he's not really got anywhere else to go. I mean, it's the conclusion. This is when he conclude things. There's nothing else for him, and it's sometimes you need that little. You know, not everyone's going to have a heroic third reel change of mind. It was very consistent with his character.
Well, I mean, again, that comes. I mean, the thing is, in Quatermass, like in all of the Quatermasses, don't be Quatermass's friend, because you ain't going to get through the episode that you're useful. And I think that it starts to kind of burn you out a bit. I think that level of, I mean, is it Quatermass 2 where like literally someone's introduced to give him some help and then they get killed and then the next other, and I felt that was. I wondered when I was rereading the book, is this going to do this? You know, like literally everyone in it is going to die except for the Doctor and the companions. You know, and they kind of do, don't they? But anyway, you have to stray. But I can only restate, I was a different mindset then. I wouldn't do it now. I suppose maybe because I've written it, I don't need to. But I certainly not a secret that the Doctor trap is a lot funnier after this one because I wanted to do a lighter one that was less complex.
And that distinctive drum beat tells us it's time for another quick pause, and we're going to listen to our second extract. And this is read for us by not just Simon, but also Alistair Lock.
Bishop faced the cross-legged patient. "We have them," he said. Came the only reply. The little dark-haired man, who had to be the vanguard of the new Myloki invasion, seemed remarkably unperturbed. Irritatingly unperturbed. How could he ever have thought the patient had a face you could lose in a crowd? "Your friends, the boy and the girl."
Ah.
He stared at Bishop with those meek eyes. There was fierce intelligence there, and anger. The patient had healed. "Why don't you at least tell me your name?" Bishop asked. He decided to match the coolness, the intelligence. "Go on, give me that."
Can I see them? Where are they?
"Tell me your name and we can start discussing that."
I am the Doctor.
"I said your name." Bishop watched him take a deep breath.
Well, that is my name.
"The Doctor?"
Yes.
Under guard, the Doctor was led into one of the secure rooms. Bishop showed him the images of McCrimmon and Zoe, with time codes to prove the footage was live.
Oh my,
said the Doctor, and even Bishop softened.
What have they done to you?
He touched the glass screen softly. "Take him back," said Bishop, and the guards moved in.
Oh, do I have to?
Asked the Doctor. His emotional restraint caught them all by surprise. He was a quiet, sensitive academic now.
It's so tedious in that cell.
He looked at his entourage, dwarfed by their numbers and bulk, the ghost of a grin.
And I promise not to hurt you.
Bishop nodded, and the guards backed away. "All right," he asked. "What do you want?" The clown face tightened in concentration. Bishop found himself drawn in, despite himself. If he was a plant, he was a bloody good one. You just couldn't help liking him. Perhaps that was what the Myloki intended. The Doctor looked at him and smiled.
You know, I would love a cup of tea, if there's one going. Now he was pacing the reception area, and armed Alex Storm was watching him, amused. They had given the Doctor his old clothes back, a strange concoction of frock coat and baggy checked trousers, and even an old battered pair of shoes he insisted on wearing, instead of the specially designed silhouette slippers. Bishop felt odd giving a prisoner so much leeway, but it had worked with Captain Matthews. Reawaken the routines, jumpstart the human memories. Bishop had learned Commander LeBlanc's reports by heart a decade ago. It was all they had to go on. I would very much like to know why you decided to shoot me. I was only trying to escape. The Doctor was playing yet another role, the outraged teenager. Alex coughed. It sounded suspiciously like stifled laughter. So what do you remember from your old life? Bishop asked, again according to the reports. Anything. Something you did. A picture. A wife. My old life? Asked the Doctor. Your previous existence. The Doctor looked startled. Well, that is going back a long way. He scratched his head. Well, Daleks, of course. A junkyard of sorts. Ian. Barbara. Or big insects. Doc Holliday. A base under the snow. He looked mournfully at Bishop and then at Alex. It's not really the sort of thing you're after, is it?
People say that a lot of people have said that the Second Doctor is quite difficult to capture, quite difficult to write for. I thought you got him very well. I had no trouble imagining Patrick in any of these scenes. It was quite easy to imagine him with opposite, Commander Straker or humanised versions of Brains or Captain Scarlet. How did you fit in Second Doctor?
Well, I loved it. I mean, I've always wanted to write for the Second Doctor because when I was growing up, there were 4, and there were in fact 3, and then there became a 4th, but my knowledge of them, like most people my age, came through the Target books. So, and they weren't all on Target books. So, you would remember reading Web of Fear or Tomb of the Cybermen, going, this, just completely thinking that era of Doctor Who would be amazing if you could see it. And then, of course, when you do see it, yeah, okay, but he, in the books, the Target book, Patrick Troughton, is just fantastic. And, and there are moments, but, once you get into the tics that he has of, I was only saying, and...
Yeah.
I really liked the idea of it.
That was very good. I think we might have to put you in touch with Mr. Briggs there. As holiday relief for Troughton.
Oh, no. Oh, James. Well, Alistair Lock and I are always doing, it is a big one, isn't it, James? But I liked all that kind of, and I loved, and it's in Tomb of the Cybermen, I loved the fact that Doctor Who is this little guy that they all overlook. And he might go, you might want to try that. And then they go, yes, I knew that all the time,
Yeah.
And I love, and it fitted really in well with the bombast of Gerry Anderson world. That you would have this little guy go, oh, that didn't go very well, did it? When they shoot him in the head, and he's always, what I like, and all doctors, the good doctors, have that sense of playing opposite how they feel, so when they're under great stress, they'll do a gag to try and, because they're alien, aren't they? And so, and Tom Baker especially does that, doesn't he? Where if something's really important, he'll do a joke, but if something's deadly serious, he'll do the opposite, And I kind of liked those rhythms of Patrick Troughton, and I always thought, but I do think that, especially when I'm rewatching them or watching lots of them for the first time, you go, but my memory of him is great from the book, like Abominable Snowman. I remember being an amazing book, and then watch it, it's some people in a room in the dark going, right, they're all sort of squashed together to fit in the studio.
Yeah, I think the animated one helped with that, because I remember when I listened to it the first time, I thought, this is just him talking, it's rubbish, but when you've got something to watch, it's a lot better.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially that when you read the book, and there was a picture in the Target book of the cave of globes with the stuff spilling out, and you're going, that's blimey, that's amazing. And then when you see it, you go, okay. And I mean, you get other things. When I watched it, and you realise that Norman Jones is playing Chryson, you go, that is fantastic. Oh wow, yeah, because obviously in my head they were all actually Tibetan,
right?
So when you see them, okay, some of them look a bit Tibetan, but I love Norman Jones. He's one of my favourite Doctor Who actors, I think. When does he next appear in the Silurians, doesn't he?
Silurians, and then it's Messingham and Dragger, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, something I noticed when I picked up the book and opened it, and the text begins on page 2, how small the type is. My God, how many words did you get into this? Because it is huge. It's so dense, the text. When you look at some of the other books that were being published around the same time, it's like, oh, that's really quite spaced out. Not that I'm complaining, because it means there's more story in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that when I opened it again after this. I went, oh my God, it's microscopic. But clearly then what they had was, these are the number of bits of paper that are going to go in this book. And you, because you get like a thing, but you can write between 70,000 and 90,000 words, I think. That was always your limit. And I think with this one, I definitely went for the 90. And, I don't think I'd just run out. I didn't know when to stop, because when I read it again, I thought, bloody hell, this is an amazing feat of structure, this. But I didn't realise that you'd get the same number of bits of paper as someone who'd written 70,000. Yeah. So I must have pushed the It does feel long. I would suggest that maybe it's a little bit long, but
it was one of those. I didn't want it to stop. I wanted it to keep going because it was just as such a big Gerry Anderson fan, it was just really interesting. I kept sort of thinking, right, well, you could do this, or you could maybe explain those people from the pyramid in that episode of Thunderbird.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it because it felt like it's always a bit weird, I think, because the scope of it is so massive that clearly it all, like you said, I think before, it doesn't immediately make you feel like Doctor Who. It's more like a Bond film, it's just vast, and they go to the Caribbean and and then they go to the jungle and then, and
it was fun imagining those scenes though as they would have done them in maybe 1968 or 6.
Totally.
I had this vision of this BBC television centre jungle and George Sewell and Troughton going round the same bit of foliage to make it look, it wasn't difficult to imagine it in Doctor Who terms. That was what was interesting about it. Because season 6 is a bit more varied than season 5. Season 5 is just all installations and stressed managers, but season 6 is more varied. It wasn't too much of a stretch. I sort of pictured it as maybe being maybe between the Space Pirates and the War Games. Just a little bit later on. Kenny, should we look at the contemporary reviews then? Do you have
yes, indeed. I do indeed.
To see
so Simon, this is from DWM issue 352 and it was written by Matt Michael. This is actually the first issue where they had the new logo and Chris and Billy in the cover back in 2005. So it may have attracted a slightly larger readership. So let's have a quick look and see what they had to say. There's something of a Gerry Anderson revival going on with the recent Thunderbirds movie and a new computer-generated Captain Scarlet. It's hardly a shock then to see Doctor Who pastiche the work of the puppeteer equivalent of Terry Nation. The Indestructible Man, with its lurid wraparound cover featuring a purple-wigged Zoe, a flying airbase, and an astonishing blurb that crams in as much plot as a season of UFO, wears its influences on its sleeve. Author Simon Messingham certainly can't be accused of misleading advertising, as the novel itself is every bit as steeped in Anderson lore, sometimes impenetrably so, as the cover suggests. Right down to the all-ladies pilot crew, the Strakerish Bishop, and the Scarlet-esque Indestructible Man himself. The book begins with a prologue set in 2068, packed with the living dead attacking the Indestructible Man as he destroys the lunar base of the alien Miloki. Though it's brief, this opening sets the tone for the rest of the novel. The invasion of 2068 is as important to the story as the events in the present day of 2096, with Messingham keen to explore the lingering effects of the war on its participants and on Earth society. It's a technique that's reinforced through continual excerpts from a history book telling the story of the original Miloki invasion, and which sheds light on the new invasion of 2096. From the TARDIS crew's point of view, this is one of their longest adventures. We first encounter the Doctor long after he arrived at the floating Skyhome base and was shot through the head, apparently fatally. 6 months later, he's just regained consciousness, surprised to find himself a prisoner of Silhouette, an organisation set up to counter the alien menace, and interrogated by its head, Commander Bishop. Bishop, who has all the subtlety of a clenched fist, believes the Doctor to be a third Indestructible Man agent of the Miloki, vanguard of a new assault on Earth. While the Doctor's been locked away, Jamie has become a foot soldier of the shattered London authorities, and Zoe is an enslaved office assistant, considering a proposal of marriage from her boss. It's in these early scenes that Messingham is at his best. The devastated London is straight out of the Quatermass films, while the scenes where Jamie has to clear the Miloki's zombified shiners from a rundown tenement feel exactly like the opening to George Romero's Dawn of the Dead.
That's great. That's brilliant.
The sequences featuring Zoe are rather less well done. Her 6-month sojourn from her friends, both of whom she believes to be dead, is barely sketched in, and her engagement to the dashing Mark Cann is cursory and out of character for this logical and slightly frosty companion. Once the three travellers are brought back together and the focus switches from London to the Skyhome facility, the novel loses some of its energy and focus, and the Anderson references start to grate. Particularly irritating are the Sharons of Global Response and the scene where Zoe is made to wear a purple wig. Camp sniggering references like these work to the book's detriment, sitting uneasily with some of the serious intent of the story. Some of the writing annoys as well. There's lots of charmless expository dialogue. Equally inelegant are the short, punchy sentences that illustrate Bishop's pugnacious character, which get tiresome very quickly. Strongly disagree. Where the book does stand out is the scale of the plot. Season 6 is notable for turning away from the claustrophobic base under siege backdrops of the early Troughton years in favour of the broader horizons of the Seeds of Death, the Space Pirates, and the War Games. The Indestructible Man thinks big, jumping from location to location at great pace. Equally impressive is Messingham's treatment of the title character, whose fate is sympathetically handled, and of the alien Myloki. Lovecraftian, dimension-hopping monsters are ten a penny in Doctor Who just now, but the Myloki stand out in being truly unknowable. Epic in scope, fast-paced and never boring, but undermined by some poor jokes and occasional crass execution, the Indestructible Man is perhaps more of a Terrahawks than a Captain Scarlet. I love Terrahawks. Can I just point out, I've got a signed Sergeant Major Zero football right behind me.
Oh, wow. You're a big Terrahawks fan. You're not going like that. I think Matt was Matt's a little harsh there. I thought the characterization of Bishop was really consistent throughout and sort of necessary because it's
you're not meant to like him.
Exactly, his mental state of dealing with everything and all that pressure. I think that was caught really well. And the Sharon thing is absolutely hilarious. You need something like that to kind of puncture the relentlessness of it all. So I think that I remember reading it.
I'm going to text him and tell him he's a twat right now.
Yeah, do it. Tell him Simon's really upset.
Oh, well, no, I mean, by then I was used to kind of getting a kick in. So, I think I was, I don't know, people felt they could have a go at me because I didn't know who I was. And they didn't really mix with, they weren't going to upset, like,
of course,
powerful people. Well, they just didn't like it. It's up to them. But, I was very aware in this book by this one, I think this is my 6th or something, that, I was never going to be big in the world of Doctor Who, but I was going to be able to carve out my own little bit of what I wanted to do. And, by then I was, like I say, I was in a good place. I didn't really care what people thought of me. I thought it was a good book, and,
I remember another review at the time. I remember standing reading it in W.H. Smith's, I think it was either TV Zone or Dreamwatch or something, and I wish I could remember who it was. I've not been able to track it down. I've tried to see if I still had the magazine or if I bought it or whatever. But I remember genuinely this review saying at the end, and I don't think they were taking the mickey, but they said, and as for all the Gerry Anderson supposed Gerry Anderson references, I didn't spot any. and I remember going, what?
Well, perhaps he was that literal minded. Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe he's reading Tomb of Valdemar.
I've read that one, actually, now that I think about it.
Oh, gosh. That's one I've kind of forgotten about. But that one did quite well, didn't it?
Yes, it got great reviews, because I remember loving it at the time and thinking, this is good. I've never read it since, but
which Doctor was that?
There's my Tom Baker.
4th.
Right, okay. I'll need to see if I can... I'll have to have a look and see if I've got it, but then if not, I'll need to track one down. We can do that.
About that, but as I recall, I wrote a really deliberately baffling first page. It's all set in the present tense. I think I did a proper sci-fi cliche. The warg fillers of, it's full of sci-fi sort of cod jargon. I don't know why I did it, but I remember laughing. but it's written in the present tense, as I recall. Make it easy.
Oh, I look forward to dig this one out.
Ever. People go, your work's just full of bastards. Yeah. But I remember, I remember that one. But I remember Tomb of Valdemar was one where they brought out a box set of Tom Baker with Tomb of Valdemar in it. Didn't bother telling me,
right,
till I read like a review of it, going, Simon Messingham's novel is the novel. There was lots of different toys in it, and the novel, my novel, which they'd recovered, and they didn't bother telling me. So I emailed Justin Rich, said, "Does something come out?" And he went, "Oh yeah, we've got your copy here. We're going to send it to you." So I didn't get any money. I just got a free version of this book there. I thought, this is where I stand in Doctor Who. I don't really, that's how. Oh yeah, you can have that lying around the office.
Do we have the I Who review, Kenny?
I can indeed. Or is that? Hang on a second. Let me. No, this is too late for I Who.
Is it? Right.
Who's gone so?
Yeah, it's quite hard to fit it in. So if it was in a copy of DW, Christopher, it was clearly on the way to coming back, Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
So this would have been like the last gasp of the adventures, which, I love the Missing Adventures. They were my favourite. I know everyone sort of slags them off the most, but actually they were my favourite things, to write for. I read a few of the others, and I didn't really like writing the McGann ones very much, but I got into it, and but yeah, this was like, I think when I read this one, I thought, wow, this guy's learned how to write now. You can kind of trace the evolution of craftsmanship, and I thought, wow, yeah,
sure.
Not my cup of tea now anymore, but it works. It's got a great gag in it, which I didn't know anyone would get, but the one about what Brain says, and
Boffin. He's not Brain.
I was trying to think what's his name. Yeah, it's Boffin, isn't it?
Boffin was hilarious. So that's the thing when I was reading it, I was going mad. I said, there's another name for Brains. What did they call him? I can't. And then when he appeared, I was just like, Boffin.
And he has the shaggy dog gag, doesn't he? Which I really liked.
It's time for our final reading of the day from The Indestructible Man, and we're going to hand back to Alistair Lock and the author, Simon Messingham.
At first, the boy didn't react to the doctor's presence at all, just sat in his chair, his face pale, tension lines traced across his face, restraining mask over his mouth. He wouldn't look at those standing over him. The doctor just stared, appalled. Bishop saw the energy drained from his body.
Oh, Jamie, I'm sorry.
The boy looked up at him.
Go away,
he mumbled through the mask. The doctor sighed.
Jamie, you're not the doctor. It's a trick. You're one of those doubles. Mr. Mackenzie told me,
said the doctor.
But I assure you that I am definitely me. You're dead.
He looked the doctor up and down.
You're not the doctor. I want to go back.
Bishop placed a hand on the doctor's arm. I think that's...
Jamie!
Bishop felt the anguish in this single word. It cut through him. He remembered his wife, and when he had spoken her name in the same tone. Helen. McCrimmon looked up. Bishop saw the hate in his eyes.
Go away. If I see you again...
The doctor stepped back.
Jamie.
The boy smiled cruelly through his mask. The doctor could see the pain in the action.
I'll kill you.
And that was that.
Did you like the cover, incidentally?
I loved it, yeah. I thought all the colours were great. And that one, it captured it totally, I thought, this is Gerry Anderson, but it's taking you to a dark place. And, there's the joke of... And it felt inevitable to me that if you were going to do this, that Zoe would wear a purple UFO wig. So I don't feel that that's tacked in as a gag. I think it is completely how you put these two things together,
Yeah. I remember seeing the cover in advance of the book being released and seeing the title and seeing Zoe in the purple wig and going, I see what this is going to be doing. Brilliant. Can't wait.
Oh, because I get that feeling. Because, I'm not sure how much I was influenced, but I remember Mark Gatiss writing Nightshade. And when it came out, everyone went, oh, that's brilliant. Oh, look, he's done a Quatermass. And it's all fantastic. How marvellous is that? And I knew that when I did it, I would get a kicking. Because that's how things work, and that's exactly what happened. I was like, yeah, I'll do Gerry Anderson now. Oh, no, you don't like that? Oh, okay, all right, and but I don't remember people hating it particularly, but it felt like an easy get, I think.
Yeah, I remember really enjoying it. I remember talking to my friend Tony at the same time, and he'd read it. I'm sure he enjoyed it as well. I think if you're appreciating what it was doing for the Gerry Anderson stuff, you're definitely going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one for the Doctor Who regulars, and you caught the second Doctor really well. So to me, I'm sort of like, what's not to like with this one, really? It does what it sets out to do very well, I think.
I don't know, really. Yeah, no, well, it's great to talk about it, because I literally hadn't looked at it, because it's quite hard to get this book. I've had a few people going, "Can you get us a copy of this?" Wow, there you go.
For the benefit of our YouTube viewers, well, Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real joy once again to have you on, and the Fun Boy 3 reunited.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we shall reconvene once I've read Tomb of Voldemort or whatever it's called.
I'll have to read it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's brilliant. Indestructible Man it never dies. It's still here. So.
Exactly. So thanks, Simon. And as regular listeners to this podcast will know, we do like to play it with a tune. So Dave, what's in your thinking today?
Well, given that this book is inspired by Captain Scarlet, and one of the best episodes of Captain Scarlet is an episode called White as Snow, where Colonel White goes sort of undercover after he and Scarlet fall out and stuff. And it starts with an amazing piece of Barry Gray music, which has come to be known as White as Snow. I think TVR17 is the name of the satellite. I think it's on Apple Music now. It's TVR17 Pop. So if you can track that down, we can play it with that. It's a banger. Simon, thank you so much for writing the book and for coming to talk to us about it. It's been great to see you.
No, fantastic.
We'll reconvene next year for Tomb of Valdemar, but not too soon, because Dave needs to read other things.
I do.
You've got a life.
Exactly. I'd like to try and have one.
I don't let him have one. Here in Power of Three land, it's sort of, Dave, read another book.
Right. Thank you for listening, folks. We will see you again, but take care. Be good.
Bye-bye.